What's up everyone? Alex here. The Tales series has steadily evolved its combat over time, and Tales of Arise features the most accessible system to date. In this video, I want to give you the fundamental building blocks of Tales of Arise's combat. This guide isn't meant to tell you how you should play the game. Rather, my hope is that by providing you with this information, you'll be able to craft your own strategies and start making sense of what's going on during battle. If you're a series veteran and you want to share your own piece of advice, I'd like to invite you to post your tips and tricks in the comments below. And, as always, if you're new to the series and have your own questions, feel free to post it in the comments below. This video is chapter marked for your convenience, and all the button prompts featured will be on the PlayStation. One of the more unique features of the Tales series is the idea of battle control, which is tied to the idea that you'll always have a target selected no matter what. Battle control has three selections: semi-auto, which is selected by default, manual, or auto. In semi-auto, when pressing the attack button, your selected character will automatically run towards your target and attack only when they're within range. In manual mode, pressing the attack button will execute said action immediately. In auto mode, your selected character will act autonomously. For players who are used to character action games, I highly recommend changing battle control to manual. That way, regardless of what you're targeting, you'll still be able to attack other enemies around you. For the sake of this video, we will call the series of button presses you're inputting an attack string, and let's use the word combo to describe the number that counts up every time you land a hit. Unlike character action games like Devil May Cry and Bayonetta, Tales of Arise does not allow you to input an infinite number of attacks. To put it another way, Tales of Arise only allows you to input a limited number of button presses before it lands you in a recovery state.
Duel of the Arts! Cyclone! You get the gist. Gusty Nail! Blah blah blah. Gusty Nail! You get the gist.
This ultimately means two things. 1. Naturally, you're limited with how many attacks you can unleash in an attack string. And 2, which is perhaps the most damaging, this will leave you vulnerable to enemy attacks. There's also one other very important aspect of Tales of Arise that differs from the aforementioned games, which is, in most cases, you cannot cancel normal attacks or arts. What this means is that anyone who has the tendency to mash buttons will find themselves seemingly unable to evade or guard. That's because Tales of Arise prioritizes playing the entire attack animation before allowing you to follow up with a new action. The combination of these three design choices are what often frustrates newcomers to the series. That being said, there are definitely ways to work around these limits. The first piece of advice I'd like to give is to be more aware of what buttons you're pressing. This is actually pretty easy, given that there's really two kinds of attacks that you can do: normal attacks and arts. Between the two, normal attacks have more consistent animation lengths, which means it'll be easier for you to evade or guard when pressing these buttons. If you're confident that you won't get attacked, use arts, which not only deals more damage than normal attacks, but can also put the enemy in a variety of situations. Arts use up an arts gauge, which eventually replenishes over time. We'll go over a faster way to replenish this later in this video. One situation, which can also make your attack strings a little bit safer, is to juggle the enemy in the air to extend your attack string. Leading with a combination of ground attacks, then juggling them up in the air, will incapacitate your target for as long as they're being juggled. Keep in mind that preempting these juggle attacks with ground attacks is required for juggling to work. Part of the challenge of being new to Tales of Arise is selecting which arts to equip. A good beginner guideline is to have 3 varied ground arts: one that can juggle enemies in the air, one that hits multiple times, and one that can recover fast. Having an art that can juggle leads to the situation I described previously, creating a safe space for you to land additional hits on an enemy that can't retaliate while in midair. Having an art that can hit multiple times allows you to land more hits while on the ground just with a single button press. This is a great way to continue to add pressure on your enemies. And having an art that can recover fast allows you to deal more damage than your typical normal attack, but less than the art that hits multiple times. Coincidentally, Alphen already has arts equipped that meet all 3 of these criteria, which enforces the idea that he's the perfect all-around character for you to learn the nuances of Arise's combat. From there are several things you'll want to pay attention to when selecting your arts. Some arts have an elemental affinity, which makes them more effective against certain types of enemies. Holding the L1 button during battle will display the current target's elemental vulnerability, and you can peruse each encountered enemy's vulnerabilities at your own leisure in the field guide. The elemental vulnerabilities are pretty easy to remember. Air and earth beat each other, while water and fire beat each other. That being said, there's no situation where using an art on an enemy who's strong against it renders it completely useless, though this will start to matter more in higher difficulty levels. In which case, you are able to swap weapons, armor, arts, and use any items at any time during combat simply by bringing up the menu, so you're never put in a situation where you're powerless to alter the course of battle. Another thing you'll want to pay attention to when selecting your arts is whether or not it has a recovery window. As you can imagine, this recovery window overrides the attack string recovery state, which means that it can stop you dead on your tracks. Keep in mind that there are arts that may leave you in a recovery state, but can still deal damage to your enemies even after you've recovered. Once you've grasped some of the fundamentals of Arise's combat, feel free to mix and match different arts and see what works for you. You might be surprised with the kinds of combinations that you'll create. And if you're hoping to use more arts, you'll be glad to know that you'll get 3 more ground and aerial art slots after reaching a certain point in the game, which you can access by holding down L2. We've covered a lot of ground, so let's recap. There are 3 things that separate Tales of Arise from other action games. For one, you're always targeting an enemy during battle. Battle control determines how your character behaves in relation to this target. In semi-auto, upon pressing attack, your character will automatically run towards your target and execute the attack only when they're within range. In manual, pressing attack will automatically execute the action. If you played a lot of character action games, I highly recommend choosing this setting. In auto, your character behaves by themselves. Attack strings are finite and can lead to a recovery state. Attack animations cannot be cancelled. There are caveats to this, which we'll get to very soon. Normal attacks recover faster and are more consistent, which lets you evade or guard easier. Arts deal more damage and have longer animations, often at the cost of not being able to evade or guard sooner. Arts use up an arts gauge, which eventually replenishes over time. Alphen's default arts is a great example of basic arts that you should equip. An art that juggles, an art that hits multiple times, and an art that's fast. Holding L1 during battle will display your current target's elemental affinity. Elemental vulnerabilities start to matter more on harder difficulty settings. Air and earth beat each other, while fire and water beat each other. You can change weapons, armor, arts, and use items at any time during combat. Some arts have recovery windows that stop you from extending your attack strings. More art slots will unlock after reaching a certain point in the game, which can be accessed by holding down L2. Up until this point, we've only really focused on learning how to maximize damage using one character. With boost attacks, you're not only able to continue your combo regardless of whether or not you're in a recovery state, but you can also interrupt or enfeeble enemies. Earlier in this video, I said that in most cases, you cannot cancel normal attacks or arts. By using your selected character's boost, you can cancel any of these animations. These boost animations also have a fairly generous invulnerability window, so if you think that you're about to get hit by an enemy and you've got your boost ready, triggering this would make the attack miss. Another perk for using boost is that it replenishes your arts gauge, allowing you to unleash even more arts. While triggering other party members' boosts won't necessarily save you from harm while in a recovery state, it can let you extend your combo a fair bit while in the act of recovery. For instance, I found that Shion's boost does a great job of buying me recovery time, since it hits multiple times. Other party members' boosts have multiple advantages when invoked, and Tales of Arise forces you into tutorials in order to learn them all. Using the right boosts at the right time will trigger boost breaks, which instantly downs enemies. Learning when to use these boosts is key to controlling the battlefield, making it easier for you to understand what's really happening. It's in that sense that I think it's important to go over these in this video. Alphen's boost can down almost any enemy, and the amount of damage it inflicts is based on how much health he's sacrificed. It has the widest range out of all the boosts. Shion's boost allows her to instantly take down flying enemies, temporarily grounding them. Any flying enemies hit by this boost will have their flight abilities restricted. Rinwell's boost interrupts any enemy's cast and steals their magic charge for her to use, not only downing them, but also rendering them unable to cast arts for a while. Law's boost can break shells and shields from armored enemies, not only lowering their defense, but also downs them as well. Kisara's boost can stop charging attacks, leaving said enemy in a down state, and weakens any subsequent charge attacks. Her boost also raises both the defense and elemental defense of the entire party for a short while. And Dohalim's boost can enfeeble quick enemies like apes and wolves, which prevents them from using evasion abilities and downs them. Now that we've learned each of your party members' boost properties, it's time to tie this all together with changing party members. As mentioned in my review, you can change your currently controlled party member at any time, and we'll be taking advantage of our knowledge of boosts while we talk about this. Typically, when you call another party member to do a boost attack on your current target, they'll simply return to their previous target after the attack is through. However, if you change your character to the one who's about to boost, simply by holding L1 and pressing the corresponding D-pad button, not only will the boost play as normal, but that character's target will shift towards the one you had targeted. This allows you to extend your attack string through a different character, and players who have mastered more than one character's playstyle will certainly have lots of fun with this feature. Is it possible to string attacks across all 6 characters, I wonder? You can certainly try by changing party members in real time during battle. By holding the L2 button as well as the direction of the party member in reserve that you want to bring in, then releasing the L2 button and holding down the direction of the character you want to trade out, you'll be able to swap party members in real time. If the reserve character has boost, they'll jump in and execute a boost attack on your current target. That said, the fact that this is an available option is pretty cool and keeps you in the thick of the action. Of the 6 characters available to you, I feel that 2 characters are beginner-friendly in their own ways. I've already mentioned plenty of times how Alphen embodies a lot of the basic concepts of the game's combat. But how about people who still don't feel comfortable being in the thick of combat and would like to be more strategic? I believe that's where Rinwell comes in. Rinwell has the ability to stay at arm's length away from enemies, and being separated from the pack allows you to survey what's going on. In fact, she's a great character to play when you're in a bind and you haven't quite figured out the enemy's tells. Every enemy in Tales of Arise has a tell that clues you in on what they're about to do. For instance, when a giant ogre-type character twists their upper body, that tends to mean that they're about to do a charge attack. As Rinwell, you'll also be able to see enemies come at you from afar a lot easier, and you'll only have to pay attention to fewer things than when you're actually in the thick of combat. It's because of this that I recommend her to any turn-based RPG player who's still reluctant in engaging in close quarters combat. Naturally, the hope is that your time with Alphen will help you get comfortable with that style of gameplay, but Rinwell won't be too far along, and you'll have the opportunity to try her out soon enough should you wish to play a somewhat more passive style. One small tweak. By default, the strategy labeled Fight with Moderation has quote-unquote ally HP 50% or less located below both resurrection actions. This basically means that the party will prioritize resurrection over players who have less health. I moved this option to the top of the list. That way, the party will be more focused on healing than resurrection. Alright, let's recap. Using your character's boost can cancel any normal attack or art animation. Your character's boost also has an invulnerability window that you can use defensively. Boosts also replenishes your arts gauge. You can use other characters' boosts to buy time and extend your combo. Boost breaks occur when enemies are hit with a correct boost. Here's a quick rundown on which characters to use for specific kinds of enemies and circumstances. Alphen, most enemies. Xion, flying enemies. Rinwell, any enemy in the middle of casting an art. Law, any enemy in a shell or wielding a shield. Kisara, any enemy in the middle of a charging attack. Dohalim, any enemy that likes to jump around, like wolves and apes. These boost breaks also have additional properties. Alphen's boost damage is determined by how much health he's sacrificed prior. Xion's boost will restrict flight abilities for a short while. Rinwell's boost will not only steal magical charges for her use, but also temporarily prevent enemies from casting arts. Law's boost will lower his target's defense. Kisara's boost will lower her target's charging attack damage while raising the party's defense and elemental defense. Dohalim's boost will restrict evasion abilities for a short while. You can change your currently controlled character at any time during battle by holding L1 then pressing the D-pad corresponding to the character you wish to control. You can also do this during a boost, which lets you control the currently boosting character in order to extend your attack strings and combo. You can also swap party members between active and reserve by holding down the L2 button, then the direction of the character you want to bring in, then releasing L2 and holding down the button of the character you want to trade out. If the reserve character has boost, they'll jump in and execute it on your current target. When she's available, consider using Rinwell if you want a more laid-back combat experience. She's great for turn-based combat fans who'd much rather sit back and strategize from afar. Every enemy in Arise has its own tell, and it's normally the same across enemies of the same type. Consider altering the fight with moderation strategy by moving quote-unquote ally HP 50% or less to the top of the list to prioritize healing over resurrection. And that's Tales of Arise's combat, at least enough to get you through and understand a lot of what's happening. If you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to post your question in the comments below. And as I said, if you're a Tales veteran, post your tips and tricks in the comments as well. Your enjoyment of the game is important to me, and if there's anything I can help clear up, I'll most certainly try to answer your questions in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.